Herzlich willkommen zu einem weiteren Wochenend-Talk der Zeitschrift PITWALK. Unser Thema heute Le Mans, Sportwagen, die Hypercar-Kategorie und auch ein bisschen von der Nordschleife des 24-Stunden-Rennens. Wir beschäftigen uns ja schon einige Male gerade mit den Hypercars für Le Mans. Mit diesem Heft hier im vergangenen Jahr haben wir damit angefangen, alles genau dargelegt. Die aktuelle Ausgabe zeigt dann den letzten Stand der Dinge, der gerade diskutiert wird. Und ich bin sehr froh, dass wir jetzt digital verbunden sind mit Sleepy Hollow in den Vereinigten Staaten, nämlich mit James Glickenhaus, einem der künftigen Hauptdarsteller sowohl des 24-Stunden-Rennens auf dem Nürburgring als auch in Le Mans. James, thanks for having us. I see we're in your workshop in Sleepy Hollow, so we can't wait to take a look at whatever you've got there.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here. Yeah, it's a nice day in New York, and this is one of our factories. It's our first factory. It's in Sleepy Hollow, New York, and we actually assembled our 003s here for the road-going ones for customers. And in the future, we are opening a new factory in Danbury, Connecticut.
Yeah, we saw these images of the new factory already, and you just released the press release in which it showed like the solar panels, the sun energy panels on the roof. Is that the same factory which you, in the meantime, dedicated to COVID-19, to corona patients, if there was an overflow in the hospitals in the region?
Yes, it is. It's a very large building. And initially, it looked like there was going to be serious need for additional hospitals in the area. But luckily, the COVID-19 situation seems a lot better. So they were grateful that we offered it, but it turned out it was not needed.
But you offered it from your factory premises, and you did a lot on face masks as well, I saw in our conversation, which we had in between. Was that something?
Yes.
Which you had to delay your racing project for a while, or could you do it additionally?
No, we were able to do it additionally, but we designed and engineered face shields and a breathable, filterable breathing mask, which some hospitals were able to use. And we also hooked up with a major manufacturer to make intubation shields for hospitals so that when they had to perform operations, they could safeguard both the patients and the doctors. And we arranged to get those manufactured. And of our face shields, we were able to deliver thousands of them to hospitals in Mexico and in the United States. And we kept that going as much as we could.
But it didn't interfere in any shape or form with the development of the Nordschleife car or the Le Mans car, mainly because that's done in Italy anyway?
Well, it's not only that it's done in Italy, but because of teleconferencing, we were able to work with our engineers and our designers, and we were at a stage where we were still deep into the design. We're now moving into the stage with the Le Mans car where we will begin building it, and that's requiring more hands-on operation. But luckily in Italy, and it seems in the rest of Europe, workers are able to come back to factories and work safely with social distancing and masks. So we think that we'll be okay with the schedule of our Le Mans Hypercar. And our Nürburgring car was finished really before the shutdown in Europe. So it's fine, it's all done, it's ready to race. And now we're just waiting on the situation where we hope that the 24 hours of Nürburgring will be able to happen in late September of this year. And if that's so, we'll absolutely be there.
I'm just, while we speak, looking left and right of you all the time because I see some very breathtaking cars in the background. One seems to be an old Nürburgring car. The other one seems to be an even older Le Mans car. Maybe you can just flip the camera on your phone and show us what you've got.
Yes, this is where we keep our collection as well as our older race cars. This one is the oldest existing Ferrari in the world. It is a 159S. It won the Turin Grand Prix. It was the third car that Ferrari made. The first car they sold, the first two Ferraris no longer exist. They were destroyed. after incidents. And we've restored it. All of the cars that we have in our collection are fully operable and are road registered and driven. So this is chassis 002, and it's a magnificent piece of history and a really fun car to drive. I personally have driven this car on the historic Targo Florio, and I really enjoyed doing that. And of course, next to it is...
Any idea what this car is worth, Jim? Must be a fortune.
I don't know, and I don't really care. I didn't buy these cars for financial reasons. I bought them because I love them, and I was lucky enough to be able to afford them. As my movie career did well, I took money that I earned and I put it into cars, and I've never sold any of my collection. But I don't care what they're worth or even think about it. I just love them, and that's what I do. So this one
Gratitude to have. So the other one's the first Nürburgring car?
Yes, this is the first Nürburgring car. This car began as a Ferrari GT2 car that we modified to be like the one-off Ferrari P45 by Pininfarina that we did. And then that was in 2011 when it first raced. And then we added for 2012 a Magnelli Moretti Formula One kinetic energy recovery system, the Kerr system. And it is, she's retired from racing, but she's as she was when she raced the Nürburgring and did really well. This car finished 12th overall, which is pretty cool.
Did you at that time think or have the impression you were taken seriously by us Germans? Because I remember that suddenly a name Glickenhaus appeared and nobody really knew who it was or a house, what it was. When did they start to actually take you serious as a contender?
Well, I think that, as soon as they saw this car, they realized even in 2011 that it was a serious contender. And in 2012, finishing 12th overall, even with spending a lot of time in the pits, I think they realized it was a serious contender. But at that point, we realized that our future would be in designing, building, and engineering and building from scratch our own cars. And that, of course, became 003, which we raced for many years very successfully. And I think in 2017, people realized just how successful a car it was. I mean, we were in second position when we crashed into another car and broke the headlights. And unfortunately, it took us 16 minutes to repair the headlights. And at the end of the day, we finished 8 minutes down. So if we hadn't had that crash, we would have won first overall by 8 minutes. But more importantly, we learned from it. And in our 004C, our new Nürburgring car, we mounted the headlights to the body. So if we had a similar incident, we would be able to replace the entire nose of the car in 16 seconds, not 16 minutes. So we're ready and we're very excited about the 004. The 004s are being built in Italy, as you know, and this is the first scale model of it, of the road car. And the race car we recently tested before the COVID situation got bad. That was in March. We tested it, and it's a fantastic car. It's a center seater. You have really good visibility. It's a wonderful car to drive, and it has relatively very low running costs. One thing that we've done is we've made it very modular and in the construction. And, this goes back to the first race cars that I collected. This blue one is a very famous Donnie Penske T70 Lola that won 8 major races, and then I converted it into a road legal car. And the one thing we learned...
Move a little closer, because that, I think, is quite a fascinating sight.
Yeah, this weirdly was owned by Andy Warhol when I bought it. He was thinking of using it in a movie. And I bought it in 1972. and over the years, road converted it. And this car has 40,000 road miles on it. But it taught me a lot about driving race cars on the road, as did this car, which is an amazing car. This is the only car made in America that won Le Mans. Its sister came in first. This one finished fourth overall, driven by Donahue and McLaren. And behind it is the mule for our first SCG. It's a 430 GT2 that became a spares car, and the mule for P45 Competizione. But the other part of our collection, we go over here. Here's a fantastic Duesenberg. I mean, this was owned by the Queen of Yugoslavia, and I'll show you. It has a really cool thing. It has a hood mascot that is La Liga.
Okay.
So it turns on, and as the Queen was royalty, she drove this car. And on the dashboard, you can see she put a real emerald, ruby, and diamond that she used for markers. The cool thing about Duesenbergs they were a overhead valve engine. They had 4 valves, overhead cam, and Ferrari used that design in a Packard. It later went on to be used by Packard. And Ferrari copied that design. Mr. Canetti had a Packard, and he showed it to Ferrari, and they used that design for the 4 valve heads of Ferraris. This is a Stutz that we own, a DV32, and it was the car that in the F. Scott Fitzgerald book, The Great Gatsby, that Daisy Miller drove in the book, not in the movie. But this is a real one, and it's a boat-tailed. It's a boat-tail car, which is very cool.
Yeah.
And it has a luggage compartment that you can open up and put in. And it's a wonderful driver. These are some of the spares and things we've collected over the years. This is very interesting. It's an automatic gearbox that Ford experimented with in the Le Mans cars. It was tested. It was never raced. This is the original Lola Yulin transmission that was in the Lola when I bought it, which was a Can-Am car. I replaced it with a little bit more streetable Ford GT ZF gearbox, because the race gearboxes with the straight cut gears and no synchromesh are virtually impossible to drive on the road.
It's a bit rough, yes.
Yeah, this is an interesting gearbox. This is the original gearbox from Ferrari P34 chassis 0846 that won the 24 Hours of Daytona. And it was replaced with a later gearbox that Ferrari made. The main problem was the oil sump on it was not enough, and the car is overheated. And you can actually see where the gearbox was repaired. And it was, Ferrari was very clever. They used the same Formula One gearbox that had inboard disc brakes at one time, and then when Ferrari modified it and turned the P3s into P4s, they went to outboard disc brakes, because the problem with inboard disc brakes is they heated the gearbox and it caused failure. But these are all spares that we keep and we found very interesting. Over here is Ferrari P45 by Pininfarina, the one-off car that I commissioned from Pininfarina based on an Enzo. And we are just doing about a 20,000 mile, 10-year service on the car, actually more, 15-year service. One of the problems you have these days is that the gasoline that they sell on direct injection motors, unfortunately, deposits a lot of carbon on the internals of the engine. And after a number of years, you have to take them apart and very carefully clean the valves and the rest of the engine. And that's what we're doing. So we're putting that back together and just going through the car. Because the one thing is, you use a car, I mean, it gets rocks and sand and grit in it, and there's always corrosion. So it's very important that you take things apart, you clean them meticulously, and if there's any corrosion, you deal with it. And if you do that, these cars will go on indefinitely. This was one thing that we learned from driving these cars, that many of these cars are so complexly manufactured and so difficult to work on that routine services are very difficult to do. In our new 004 Nürburgring car, you can remove and return the engine to the car in an hour and a half. I mean, in a Ferrari like this, it's a 2-day job. And the parts are really stupid that Ferrari charges. I mean, for an O-ring that's the size of a small coin, it's $34. And, you need, 20 or 30 of them. So we're just bored with that. And one thing we're trying to do is to make our cars much easier to work on, to make our parts much less expensive, and to make them so that a normal human being can, in fact, fix them and use them. Because, I mean, we want people to drive our cars and to use them for a long time. Here is actually...
Let me just jump in there for a minute, Jim, because that's a very interesting point. I've got a friend of mine who is a heavy metal musician back in Germany, Viktor Smolsky, and he said he had a friend who was thinking of buying one of your new Nordschleife cars and entering it themselves as a customer car. So you are not only entering them by yourself as a Glickenhaus factory team, but you're also going to offer them to customers now?
Yes, we are offering them to customers. And the first customer car we sold is for a customer who has bought road cars from us as well. But he is going to use it as a track day car. And we hope that there will be 1 or 2 customers who will race alongside us in the Nürburgring. And I think that was on track. It's a little bit off track, maybe because of the Corona situation, but that will pass. But this was chassis 1 of 003C. This raced at the Nürburgring many times, did really well, won first in class, finished second overall in a VLN race. And then a customer asked us to road convert it for them, and we did. And we're just doing, after many miles of driving, we went through it, and we're doing just a service on it, and it'll be back together soon. And we learned things. I mean, the one thing that he asked us about for driving on the road, if we could shorten the gearbox ratio, because, you're not going down the Dottinger hole at 300 kilometers an hour on the road. And he wanted a little lower ratios in the gearbox. So we're doing that now. These are some of the awards and trophies, things.
And other things which you have to adapt if you put them on the road is the way you work the suspension, the springs and damping, because I understand you always go for the philosophy to have a rather soft car standing in the springs, just to be able to have it actually kneel down on the Döttinger Straight, for example, to reduce the aerodynamics.
Yes. Well, it's more than that. The Dottinger and the whole Nürburgring is really much closer to this is an FIA championship trophy we won with P45C for hybrid. We won the alternate energy cup, which is a pretty cool thing for a privateer to have. But as you said, the one thing that you learn from racing at the Nürburgring is that you need a pretty soft suspension, because the car is jumping, it's flying, it's coming down, and the Nürburgring is really a road course. So we do modify the suspension for the road, but by and large, we found that our race cars handle really well on the road. Now, I think that this is an interesting point. A lot of people say, oh, I want a race car and I want to drive it on the road. And we just make sure that the client completely understands exactly what a real race car on the road is like. And we often suggest that they may want to buy a pure road car version of our car, which is frankly more suited to driving on the road. But if they're a person who likes a little bit more of a racy car and will take it from time to time to the track, then that works out really well. And we have both pure street versions, we have sort of competition street versions, and we have full race versions. So we have a lot of different customers who want different things, and we try to accommodate them. This, of course, is our original Ferrari P34 chassis 0846 that won the 24 Hours of Daytona with Chris Amon and Lorenzo Bandini. And this car, incidentally, was at the Nürburgring. I was coming back from the historic Targa Florio where I drove it. They shut the original course with Nino Vaccarella and I, and we drove it there. And when the organizers saw it in the truck, they asked if I would drive a lap of the Nürburgring. So I'm not sure what year it was. I think it was 2016. At lunchtime, the marshals agreed to stay on, and I drove an entire lap behind a safety car, of course, with my son in the car, and we drove the Nordschleife in that car, which was really amazing. An amazing thing.
You're really in love with the Nordschleife then, by all what you've done there, the money you've put in your cars and the trophy and everything. How did that love affair actually start?
Well, to me, I remember racing in the 60s. There actually is the Ferrari racing. They claim in that poster it's a Targa Florio. It's not. It's at the Nordschleife. So it's pretty funny. But to answer your question, in the 60s, there was an amazing time for endurance racing. And the racing was more of the kind of event that you might have like a Woodstock or a Burning Man, and then a race. And at Le Mans in '67, 1 million people went to that race. And, I think the Nordschleife today has the most authentic feeling of this 60s races. And at the Nordschleife, the Chaparrals from America came and won in '67. So that's always held a special, place in my heart, and what we've tried to do. So I think it's a wonderful, special race course, and we will race there indefinitely. I mean, we love it, and we are really looking forward to coming back in September with our new car.
Yeah, we've seen pictures of the new car and when it was tested for a 30-hour test. I think it was somewhere in Spain or in Portugal. I've forgotten, to be honest. But
yeah, in Aragon in Spain.
Aragon in Spain, that's it. How was the test? And I saw there was a bit of modifications due afterwards. How was the test and what's the time frame in general? Did Corona really do any harm to it, or is it still on track, as you say? And also, when are the customer cars due, if any? Would they be delayed by 1 year due to the bloody virus?
No. The car was great. There were a few very minor changes we made after the 30-hour test. They're done. The car is completely ready to race, and we're building up the first customer car as we speak, and we'll deliver that in August. That first one that we're delivering is going to go to the United States, and the customer is going to use it as a track day car. They're not going to race it alongside us at the Nürburgring. And then we have a third one that a customer is talking to us about. And if they commit to it soon, it could be a second car at the Nürburgring. But, everybody has been slowed up and challenged by this. So we no longer make predictions as to what will or won't happen.
I think in particular in Italy, because the team who builds them cars, both for the Nordschleife and for your Le Mans Hypercar project, it is based in Italy, right at the heart of where it all broke out.
Yes, it is, but it seems to be over there to a large extent, and they're opening up travel. And I'm planning to go over to Italy in August, and our goal is to test the final test of the Nürburgring car 004C, the first test of the road going 004S, and I'm just going to drive chassis 5, the last 003 C that ran at the Nürburgring last year. And then we'll bring it back to New York and retire it. And I'll also do a final test of Modulo, and then I'll bring that home. So we'll have a big test in Italy. Some customers are going to come over for that. And then the car will be ready to race in September.
So there's going to be one for definite, maybe a second car on the Nordschleife. And as we learned yesterday, there is going to be 2 cars at Le Mans for definite next year when the new Hypercar rules.
Yes, the Le Mans car is definite. That's another customer, but that customer is going to race alongside our factory car. When I say race, they're not going to drive it, so we will manage that, and those cars will be totally equal, and we will have a 2-car team. And then after that the racing career is done, the customer is going to take it and convert it to a very special track day car.
How is the Le Mans car, the Hypercar? Because there was a bit of a back and fro with getting the Hypercar rules in line with the LMDH rules for IMSA, which came in rather late. And I understand there were certain modifications to be made to the rules of the Hypercar as well, because there, as far as I understand, there is performance windows like engine performance, aerodynamic efficiency, and one way is up against the other. If you've got a very, very powerful engine, you have to give away a little bit of your aero efficiency just to make sure that the cars are equally matched. And some of these cornerstones of the performance windows had to be rejuggled a bit. Is that correct?
Yes, the rules underwent quite a lot of changes. The major change that happened was because of Aston Martin. They wanted to race their Valkyrie, which was really not suited too much to be a race car. So they required, they asked everybody to accept a higher weight limit because they had trouble getting to the lower weight. And they also wanted to raise the horsepower because they wanted to use a race version of their V12, which frankly was a very unsuitable engine for Le Mans. It's a giant V12. I mean, at Le Mans, you want a small, compact car and a smaller engine. And Toyota and us reluctantly agreed because we thought, well, having Aston Martin join would be great for the fans and great for racing. And then Aston Martin, who got into massive financial difficulty, and who knows if they're going to survive or not, pulled out, and the rules changed again. And unfortunately for us, we had been dealing with, we had hoped to use an Alfa Romeo based road engine as a race engine. We were going to develop that, and it would have been fantastic to have Alfa Romeo come back to Le Mans, and they were excited. But when the rules changed, we no longer could do that because we went from having to make 670 horsepower to having to make 870 horsepower. So we looked into a few possibilities, and one of those possibilities was Pipo Motors. Pipo is a fantastic engine builder, been around for many years, and have won the world champion rally championship for many years with engines that they've developed. And a lot of people use Pipo engines. They branded them as Subaru or Citroën or Ford or other people.
I was going to say it was Ford, it was Peugeot who won the title with Pipo engines and everything. So they have a really, really great history and record.
Yes, and they were interested. They wanted to go to Le Mans. That was a dream of theirs. So we made a deal. And the idea was basically to take 2 Pipo WRC motors and then to make a new common block for them that could turn it into a V8. So instead of an inline 4, you would have a 3.8 liter twin turbo V8, and we were able to make the 870 horsepower, and we were good with that. And then because of convergence, the IMSA guys couldn't make that much horsepower, and they frankly wanted to use a hybrid, I think for political and green reasons, but for me, it seemed kind of a stupid thing because they're talking about a 40 horsepower hybrid. I mean, and it's a rear wheel drive hybrid, which is very inefficient for weight. You know, the Toyota system is a much better situation than the front wheel drive hybrid. But the problem is now to balance the performance, the ACO is talking about not letting them use it at low speeds and not letting them use it in the rain. So we thought the advantages of a hybrid disappeared and we stayed with our ICE engine. And so now it's Toyota and us. We're the only two left. You know, IMSA claims they're going to get manufacturers to build their LMDHs. We'll see if that happens. But IMSA, you know, wants to have their cake and eat it. Like, they want to be able to race at Le Mans, but in their statement, they're not going to allow us to race at the 24 Hours of Daytona. They're only going to allow, quote, mainstream manufacturers. So, I mean, they're discriminating against us. So we're not going to be able to race it.
So you reckon you can't go to Daytona? Because Toyota told me when the new LMDH idea came out, Toyotas were positive they could go, but then they would qualify as a mainstream manufacturer, which you're not.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. So we, you know, they might let Toyota go, but they're not going to let us go. And quite honestly, I'm not sure how that's going to work out. I mean, yesterday we saw Porsche pull out their GTLMs from IMSA. Mm-hmm. Today you saw BMW pull out their race cars from the British Sports Car Championship. I mean, these are crazy times. They're very difficult. You know, the major manufacturers are all speaking about making electric cars. You know, racing doesn't promote electric cars. The other thing about this situation that's very scary is that as these big manufacturers are likely going to sell 20 to 30% fewer cars in calendar year 2020 and 21 than they did in 2019, they're going to be laying off workers. And is it going to be acceptable for them to keep spending the kind of money that they are on racing when they're laying off workers? I don't think so. So I think we're going to go back to how racing used to be, when normal people could afford to buy a sports car or an off-road dune buggy and go racing. I mean, if you look at the numbers, they've gotten totally, completely insane with costs. I mean, you know, you're speaking of spending $10, $15 million to build a hypercar and to race at Le Mans. I mean, IMSA claims their car is going to be a value at $15 million a year. Well, that's absurd. That's not a value. I mean, for $500,000 US, we will sell you a Glickenhaus boot that you can drive down, race the Baja 1000, and drive home. So, you know, these are interesting, crazy times, and we're going to see how they go. But
I'm not quite sure, Jim, what's going on with IMSA, because I was hoping to get Laura Closer, head of Cadillac Racing, to join this conversation, but she frankly said no, she can't, because it is not clear whether Cadillac or General Motors would jump aboard and join the new hybrid regulations, which are called LMDH. So if Cadillac, which is a cornerstone of the current IMSA, if they go out, and if Porsche do not come in with their Panamera V8-based new LMDH, which rumor has is going to come, then it's going to look very, very shaky down there.
I think this whole thing is shaky. I mean, I think it's crazy. And I think that IMSA, you know, to make a statement that they don't want Glickenhaus racing the 24 Hours of Daytona, I mean, it is stupid. I mean, it's insane. And as you say, I mean, is General Motors and Cadillac really going to keep spending this money in racing? This remains to be seen. They may or they may not. But, you know, we are going to keep racing the Baja. We are going to keep racing the 24 Hours of Nuremberg. We are going to race Sebring, Spa, and Le Mans next year, and hopefully the rest of WEC, depending on the situation. But, you know, at some point, we're going to have to gravitate to races that help us sell cars and are affordable. I mean, we're a micro company. If we can sell 15 or 20 cars a year, we can continue, we can sell cars, and we can keep racing. I think that we will be able to do. But if you're a car company that has to sell 5 million cars a year, that's quite a different animal. And I think you're seeing with Porsche that they are having to take a good, hard look at what is working and what isn't. I mean, I was kind of shocked that they pulled out of IMSA, because I do think that, you know, racing sells Porsches, but they're probably looking at value. They're saying, hey, how many people watch IMSA races? What is the exposure? You know, it's streamed, it's not on television. I mean, the 24 Hours of Nürburgring, at least, is on Eurovision for 25 hours of TV. I mean, Daytona's not on free TV. It's not accessible. So I think people are going to make cold, hard decisions, and the world as we know it is going to change. And it's fine with us. We're happy.
How is the time frame of your Le Mans car then? Because COVID-19 interfered obviously in that development to a certain extent as well, but then they have reshuffled the calendar of the WEC, of the World Endurance Championship, moved back from the old super season, run through the winter system and go back to a conventional calendar year season. So did that help you to get it on schedule again?
Well, we never were going to be able to start racing in September. Our schedule has not changed. It's the same. We are starting to manufacture the parts, the tub and the carbon fiber and other suppliers. Our engine will be on the dyno early July. We envision beginning manufacturing the car in September, having it ready to test in November, and begin testing it early January. And we will race at Sebring in March. We will race Spa, and we will race Le Mans. So far as I know, those are the only 3 races of 2021 that are finalized. And, you know, I mean, I know that they'll want to have other WEC races, but as it stands today, we don't know where they will be or when they will be. So obviously we, and as other people, are waiting for that information to be able to figure out what we can and can't do. But as it stands now, we will be able to test our Le Mans Hypercar in January, and we will be able to race 2 cars in Sebring, Spa, and Le Mans, and we hope after that in the WEC. But until we know what's going to happen, we don't know. And I think that
so far there is no body. It's just a mock-up, a mini model, which is in the wind tunnel.
Well, it's not just a mini model. It's a 60% accurate model of the car, which is what you use in the wind tunnel. And all of the engineering is ongoing, and we are starting to build the first tub, the first 2 tubs actually, and the suspension pieces. So it's coming together. And in September, it will be we'll have 100% of the parts available, the engine proven on the dyno. And I mean, that car is going to happen. I mean, I personally think that the COVID situation is getting a little better. You know, oddly, these demonstrations that are happening worldwide, protesting the police brutality that killed an American, George Floyd. Well, we're going to find out if there's going to be a second wave, because these demonstrators are packed. They're certainly not social distancing, and they're not all wearing masks. So if there's not a huge explosion in a second wave, then I think we can safely say that COVID is beginning to not be so much of an issue. And there will be vaccines, so that'll end. We're hopeful that the 24 Hours of Nürburgring will happen, and I personally believe that the first 3 races of 2021 will happen. But it's anyone's guess what will happen to further races or to further manufacturers. I mean, it doesn't sound to me like there are going to be so many major manufacturers who are just going to keep racing the way they did. And the fact that what you just told me about Cadillac means that they're not committing. So if they don't commit, I mean, IMSAs, we know it could fall apart.
In which wind tunnel is your LM Le Mans car being designed? Have you got your own tunnel in Italy, or are you using one externally?
We're using an external one that is a Formula One wind tunnel. And for reasons that'll be clear as we go on, I'm not going to mention the name of that one or the people doing it, but they're very serious and competent people.
And going back to the Nordschleife car that used to have an Honda engine in it, if I remember correctly, from this last couple of years, is that still the case, or have you changed anything on the engine side there?
No, the engine side is the road engine. We developed the engine based on the road engines. The road engines we're using are from General Motors. They're fantastic engines. They are used in the Corvettes. We have two engines. One makes 650 horsepower and can have a manual transmission. And the other one makes 750 horsepower and has a dual clutch paddle shift. And when I say they make 650 and 750, that's the numbers that General Motors publish, but they're frankly very conservative. On the dyno, the 750 horsepower engine, completely stock, made 840 horsepower and 1,050 newton meters of torque. They are wonderful bulletproof engines. They're 6.2 liters. In the road cars, they're supercharged. In the race cars, we developed a naturally aspirated version of it. It only has to make 500 horsepower in GT3, and it can make 500 horsepower. We ran it for 80 hours, and it was still running strong. And we tore it down and looked at it, and it frankly was fine. So the longevity is going to be a lot stronger. The price is a lot lower. We've added injectors to it. So instead of just the 8 direct injectors, it also has 8 port injectors. So it has 16 injectors. We've replaced the internals and made them very durable. And the engine ran flawlessly and is a great engine. And so that's the engine that you'll see in September when we show up.
So it sounds very much like this car could indeed become a threat to the GT3 crop, because obviously you're not in GT3 class because it's not a GT3 car by birth, but it's on even Stevens with GT3 cars through balance of performance and through putting it into the pecking order.
Look, people tell you this and you say, yeah. But the 004C will be the fastest GT3 car in existence, period. Now, with BOP, they can make it run wherever they want it to. But it has incredible aero. It is actually better aero than the 003, because the 003's design was contemplated on very, very high speed, low drag racing at the Nürburgring Ring. I mean, in the last race in 2017, we were going 300 kilometers an hour on the Dottinger, and they called me on the radio and they said, Jim, you can't go 300 kilometers on the Dottinger or we're going to black flag you. I mean, you can win the race, but you can't go 300 kilometers. We were running the exact BOP they had given us, but the car was just incredibly fast. So we said, no problem. We cranked it down to, I think, about 270 kilometers an hour, and we were still in second place and could have easily moved into first place. And then we had that accident. But realizing that they do not want cars to go 300 kilometers an hour on the Dottinger, the 004 was designed not to have the same low drag at high speeds, but it has much more usable downforce at lower speeds. So the 004C will be much faster than the 003C was. Now, they'll give us a fair BOP, and we'll be racing against big factory GT3s that are famous and whatnot. But they are not going to be as quick as us, except with the BOP, and that's fine. And once again, if we only have a one-car team, as you know, it's very difficult and anything crazy can happen. So it's very hard. I mean, you know, when we race against 8 Mercedes-Benz and 6 BMWs and 8 Audis and, you know, whatever. But I mean, we beat it. I mean, Ferrari and Lamborghini, we beat easily. And the other teams and Porsches are very serious competitors. But having said that, I mean, if we had 8 SCG 004Cs running, I personally would advise you to bet a lot of money that we would come in first overall.
And still, I tend to think, from all what I've learned through my journalistic career, Le Mans is still a completely different animal compared to the Nordschleife, because the cars are obviously more sophisticated, and there you are going to face the might of Toyota, who, although it's a different car, have gained a lot of experience. They know inside out Le Mans, they know inside out the hybrid technology, everything. Do you, hand on heart, really believe you as Glickenhaus can take him on and beat them?
Look, everything you just said is completely true. Having said that, our hypercar is a very serious effort. We have some very competent people working on the car. And quite frankly, I've learned a thing or two over my 70 years. I'm not quite 70, but I'll be 70 soon. And so do I think that we're going to definitely win? Of course not. Do I think it's possible that we could win? Absolutely. I mean, our effort is a serious effort. Now, we'll both have 2 cars, and Toyota, as you say, has learned more than a thing or two. But Le Mans can break your heart, as Toyota saw a couple of years ago when they were winning the race and just about it was over. And then in the last moments, they had some problem with their hybrid system, and Porsche beat them. So anything can happen at Le Mans, but it will be a lot more difficult for us to finish first overall at Le Mans than it will be at the Nürburgring. I mean, last year we would have won the Nürburgring except for that accident. I know people say stuff like that, but our car was much faster. And the 4C will be equally as fast. And they will do their job on the BOP, so all the cars will be equal. And then it'll be up to the racing gods to decide. But your point about Le Mans and Glickenhaus is totally correct and totally fair. Ciao, Sal. Go ahead.
All right, Jim, I think time's running up. I thank you very much for taking the time and allowing us into your factory, into your impressive collection. I think a lot of people are going to be rooting for you at the Nürburgring for sure, and maybe even at Le Mans, because quite frankly, not only do Germans love the underdogs, also I think people and motorsports in general does need people like you in these times, because I think you're quite right. It's going to become more and more difficult with manufacturer involvement, and it's going to be downgraded towards a more private effort. And obviously we all need guys like you who are crazy enough and have their heart in it to really keep it going. I hope it's going to work out fine for you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you. Thank you very much for taking your time, Jim.
Thank you so much, and please send me a link and we'll put it up.
Sure. Thank you very much. Will do. Thank you.